Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. And happy Star Wars Day! Woo!
Happy Star Wars Day.
Yes. I believe May the 4th be with you when this comes out. Yes. If you're listening to it when it comes out, it is Star Wars Day. Very exciting. And I'm sure you've heard a lot of our Star Wars content lately. And we thought, I thought, what better way to celebrate than with a Feminist Movie Wednesday on Rogue One, a Star Wars story. And in fact, I, for the occasion, made a very special drink. Unfortunately, I made it kind of on a whim this morning, so it's not quite there yet. But it's like a gin infused with butterfly pea flower and glitter. It's very, very pretty.
Glitter?
Edible glitter.
Oh, okay.
I didn't just put arts and craft glitter in my
I was like,
class,
girl, we
promise.
need to talk.
But it's Star Wars Day. No. Edible glitter. And one of the reasons this is on my mind is because over on Savor, the other podcast I do, we're doing an episode on the butterfly pea flower, which actually has a fascinating history and is named after the clitoris. So check that out if you're interested. All right. So yes, today we are talking about Rogue One, a Star Wars story. A lot of you have written in to suggest this, so thank you. Also, it feels very wrong doing this without Holly Fry because this is her favorite, or at least to my, unless anything is, bumped it off the top, is her favorite Star Wars thing. So don't hate us, Holly. We were thinking about maybe doing another happy hour with her soon where we could just talk about it.
Yeah.
But speaking of, this is a movie that I will never forget watching with Samantha for the first time because we had a bit of a misunderstanding. Or a misunderstanding on my end.
Yeah. To be fair, though, okay, I feel like, so we've already had this argument every time. Every time she brings up this movie, I can't let it go. Because the one thing that I have assigned her with, and again, this is all on me, but still, I love to project because it's fun, that you have to warn me if there's sadness in this. Because I just need to be prepped. My journey with Star Wars started 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, with you. I have never fully watched any of the movies, and I've never seen it. So I feel like you should have been aware that I knew nothing and that I get traumatized by very sad movies. And as Holly put it, in which we were trying to relay what happened, this is the Titanic of all Star Wars, the franchise. Everybody dies. I was not prepared, and the anger on my face. But it's not just that everybody dies, but they start at the very beginning just killing off everyone. So the tone of the whole thing is there's no redemption. They just all die.
I remember very clearly, we were at the beach watching this. And there was a part where I looked over and you were getting angrier and angrier, and it was towards the end. And I kind of shrugged and I was like, well, what did you expect? I mean, they all die in the end. And the look you gave me it struck me down dead.
The look I gave you was, what do you mean everybody is dead? Why?
Oh, man. And then there was a long, awkward silence until we got to the end.
Yes. And I just sat there and stared. And I said, you've betrayed me. And or something along the lines of, why would you do this to me? You should have warned me. What the...
Well, and my bad. But I just assumed everyone knew that's what happened in that.
No, I knew nothing about Star Wars. I think this was our first head into let's watch the prequels and the sequels.
Yeah.
At this point in time, I hadn't seen them. And I'm like, why would you do to me?
Well...
There was no redemption. No one survived. And I was very angry. I was like, I need at least one freaking person to be alive. And there wasn't.
Leia makes it.
And you kept going on. And the thing about that was you kept telling me, this is my favorite, one of my favorites.
Mm-hmm.
This is Holly's favorite.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know why. In my mind, that means something happy is happening. And this is going to be so amazing because this is before I realized you like the traumatizing versions of things, fictions. And I was like, what? And then on top of that, if I remember correctly, you're like, but it has the best hug scene ever. And I'm like,
it does.
You, they died.
That is such a good hug, though.
Okay, I'm done. This is how my voice goes every time we discuss this. I get very, very authoritative and annoyed.
I like it. And I probably deserve it. I do want to actually mention, though, I think this whole misunderstanding, which I'm just going to call it, is actually based on a misunderstanding of mine. Because the first time I saw this is my favorite non-original trilogy Star Wars movie. It is very sad. I watched it yesterday and I was like, I know what happens. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so sad.
Yeah, I couldn't watch the ending.
It is brutal. That is real sad. But the first time I saw it, which was kind of before I really, like, I've always loved Star Wars, but it was kind of before this like real deep dive I've done during the pandemic. I thought it was supposed to take place between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, which is incorrect. I thought it was based on the line Mon Mothma says in Return of the Jedi, where she says, many Bothans died to bring us this information. I thought that's what it was because, surprise, there's 2 Death Stars. So I feel like that's an easy mistake to make, stealing the Death Star plans. Also, it's clear I didn't know what a Bothan was. But anyway, whatever. I didn't either, but I would have known something was amiss had I known what a Bothan was. So that's part of the reason I kind of thought everyone knew. I thought, like, oh, she says it in Return of the Jedi. Many Bothans died to bring us this information, which would have been, please don't, this movie is very sad. That would have been sadder because then that plan was like a fake. But anyway, so I was watching this in theaters when it first came out and Tarkin showed up, who's kind of that like creepy older British guy who's in charge of the Death Star in A New Hope. And I was like, no, this is wrong. How could they make such a big mistake? He's dead.
He's not dead.
Anyway, I was wrong. And also I lost my scarf that day. So that was a
sad day.
Not a win for me. Not a win for me. But yes, this movie, I will say, is a very big tonal difference. And this is something I'm kind of struggling with because the original trilogy I maintain is like children's fairy tale. And I love it. And then this comes in and it's like, but actually everyone dies and it's war. I don't think it's wrong, but it's kind of like a disconnect. I really enjoyed it. And if you have seen in my opinion, very super cute deleted scene from A New Hope, where Luke and his friend / crush, according to fan fiction, Biggs Darklighter, who later died in the Battle of Yavin trying to destroy the Death Star, they're discussing politics. And Luke is so excited because he saw in the sky what he thought was a firefight. And yes, that's the battle that's taking place at the end of Rogue One. Of course, that's retconned that they did that afterwards. But it is, I really like that deleted scene. But anyway, it happens immediately before A New Hope. Immediately before.
Everyone dies.
And then there's hope.
Whatever. Still so mad.
Yeah, I can feel it. I can feel it. James Gunn recently made news when he said that this movie was the most underrated Star Wars anything. A series based on the character Andor from this movie recently got greenlit for a second season, even though the first season hasn't come out yet. But then it was supposed to have 5, and now they've cut it down to 3. So who knows? I don't know what's going on.
So wait, Endor is where the Wookiees...
No, Andor, not Endor.
Oh. See,
Cassian.
This is why I say no, don't assume I know anything about Star Wars just because I've watched it with you 50,000 times.
Why would I assume that? Well, that's kind of why I've shifted the format, and I'm very open to questions at any time. Because clearly, I have no real grasp on when people don't understand everything that I know about Star Wars.
It takes me a long time. Let's be honest.
Yeah, well, it's confusing. It's totally fair. And yes, you can see our many, many past episodes on Star Wars, many in this month about fictional women in the world of Star Wars. Perhaps for this one particularly, see the one that we did on the feminism of Star Wars. Forever ago, Bridget and I did one where we talked about this movie a lot. And the feminist movie Friday or Wednesday, who knows, on the prequels and the sequels. Which yes, we have done all of these things. Which I also think the prequels could be the Titanic too, because you know what's happening, but everybody kind of knows what happens to Darth Vader. Clearly, not everyone knew what happened before A New Hope. Anyway, before Samantha gets angry at me, let's talk about the plot. I'm sure that'll make it better. Rogue One is a 2016 space opera directed by Gareth Edwards with a screenplay by Chris Weitz and Tony Gilroy from a story by John Knoll and Gary Whitta. And yes, I watched this yesterday, and then further with characters based on George Lucas. It is the first standalone movie in the Star Wars universe. It's also the first one that doesn't have the scrolling yellow script at the beginning.
Oh.
Yeah. It stars Felicity Jones as Jyn Erso, Diego Luna as Cassian Andor, Mads Mikkelsen as Galen Erso, Ben Mendelsohn as Imperial Officer Orson Krennic, Donnie Yen, who is a huge name in Hong Kong cinema, as Chirrut Imwe, Jiang Wen as Blaze Malvis, who's Holly's favorite, Riz Ahmed as Bodhi Rook, Alan Tudyk as K2SO, Forrest Whitaker as Saw Gerrera, with bonus CGI cameos from Tarkin, not necessarily CGI, but Darth Vader and Princess Leia, and other cameos by Jimmy Smits as Bail Organa, whom I love, C-3PO and R2-D2. And yes, Darth Vader has this really terrifying hallway fight scene they mimicked with Luke in The Mandalorian, and you can watch it side by side. It's really cool. Also, Mon Mothma. It was generally well received. It was a financial success. I can't wait till we talk about some of the reviews. It's going to be so fun. Okay. So the film opens on research scientist Galen Erso and his wife and daughter hiding out on a remote planet. Galen and his wife instruct their daughter Jyn, their Stardust, to hide when they notice Imperial troopers led by weapons developer Orson Krennic approaching. Jyn runs through the fields as Galen confronts Krennic, who is there to force him to work on completing the Empire's planet-destroying weapon, the Death Star. Galen tries to refuse, and his wife Lyra is killed in the skirmish, and Galen agrees to accompany them. We'll talk about that later, I promise. As Jyn escapes and is rescued by rebel extremist Saw Gerrera, who actually was in Clone Wars.
So, 15 years go by. A cargo pilot named Bodhi Rook defects from the Empire in possession of a recorded message from Galen Erso destined for Saw Gerrera, who is hiding out on the planet of Jeddah. The Rebel Alliance hears about this defection and a super weapon called the Death Star, and they send Cassian Andor, an Alliance intelligence officer, to investigate. At the same time, Jyn Erso is freed from a labor camp and brought before Alliance leader Mon Mothma. Mon convinces her to aid in the search for Jyn's father, Galen, so they can learn more about the Death Star and a possible weakness it might contain, while at the same time tasking Cassian with killing Galen if they find him. Also unnecessary.
I love it. I can't wait till we get to the discussion portion. Cassian, Jyn, and a reprogrammed Imperial droid named K2SO make their way to the planet Jeddah, where the Empire is harvesting kyber crystals, which are the hearts of lightsabers, in order to power the Death Star. When they arrive, things are immediately tense. Saw Gerrera and his forces are facing off against the Imperials. Jyn and Cassian are captured and taken to Saw, who has also imprisoned and interrogated Rook. Saw plays Galen's message for Jyn, in which Galen reveals he built a weakness into the Death Star called Project Stardust, although that's not revealed until later, and that she should go to the planet Scarif to get the Imperial layouts of the project. Cassian and Rook are able to escape with the help of Chirrut Imwe, a blind spiritual warrior who uses the Force, and his companion mercenary Blaze Malvis.
My favorite line, I will say, is when he does get the hood on his head and he's like, really?
Right?
Because he's blind. I thought that was fantastic. And I laugh every time. And he is the one redeeming character, except he dies. So at the same time, Krennic, who is desperate to show off the fruits of his labor and looks very much like a German Nazi soldier and get recognition for his work, orders a low-power demonstration of what the Death Star is capable of by firing at the capital of Jeddah. Jyn and the gang are able to escape in time, though Saw Gerrera stays behind, which he didn't have to. I don't understand. The demonstration backfires for Krennic when Tarkin takes control of the project due to Rock's defection and related security issues, so he claims.
I love the drama between Tarkin and Darth Vader and Krennic. We're going to talk about that. I have a whole section on it, but I really love they're kind of like sassy.
So I want to go back to that Saw Gerrera could have lived.
Okay, yes, he could have. And we can talk about that as well.
Unnecessary death.
Yeah. He's very intense, we shall say.
He's perfectly cast, though. I just want to put that out there. Oh,
excellent. So good.
Forrest Whitaker. So great. Anyway, keep going.
Rook directs them to the planet of Edu, where Galen Erso is stationed. Cassian instructs Jyn to stay behind on the ship, but she ignores him, sneaking out to catch a glimpse of her father, who, again, she has not seen since she was a child. Cassian prepares to kill Galen via sniper rifle, but decides against it when he notices Jyn approaching. However, the rebel forces launch a bomb strike that hits just after she reveals herself. And after Galen admits he is the traitor, Krennic orders the deaths of the other researchers on his team, and they are executed. So this happens, and then the rebels come in, and they launch this bomb strike. And Galen is wounded and dies in Jyn's arms. She is forced to leave his body behind and escapes with Cassian and the others. Krennic is summoned by Vader, and when Krennic demands to speak with the Emperor, Vader force chokes him, telling him to be careful not to choke on his aspirations. Classic. I wonder how many puns he went around making.
Yeah, he should have, especially when it's like, don't choke on that. Also, that didn't sound like James Earl Jones. I want to put that in there. When I heard that line. So Jyn, now armed with the knowledge of her father's intentions after all this time, who obviously has to die so they can't be happy, tries to pursue the leaders of the rebel fleet to go to Scarif to steal the Death Star plans, but she fails, obviously because everything is the worst. Determined to try anyway, she sets out to commandeer a ship and is approached by Cassian and a group of fighters who want to help her out of guilt. I don't know. Rock names their stolen Imperial ship Rogue One. Jyn gives an inspirational speech about how they're going to fight till the very end, and they do. A disguised Jyn, Cassian, and K2SO, who has become one of my favorites. I've decided that I just truly love defiant, rebellious robots or droids.
You do.
Those are my favorite because I love some K2SO as much as I love Chopper.
Yes, Chopper's also fantastic.
Just so you know. They enter the Imperial base while the rest of the rebellion force attacks to cause a distraction, and they all die. When the Alliance leaders hear about this, they reverse their decision and send their fleet in support, and then comes all the sadness and all the death and all the hateful deaths and all the feels. I'm fine.
It is moving. I was surprised. I
wasn't moved. I'm angry.
I think that might be our differences in emotional reactions to things. But okay, here we go. Let's break down this sadness. So K2SO sacrifices himself so Jyn and Cassian can enter the room where the data is held. And notably, this is after kind of Jyn, who is distrustful of droids, gave him his much-desired blaster. Like, they kind of had this connection. Chirrut dies after activating the master switch so the rebellion can contact the ground to get the data. Baze Malbus dies, killing Imperial forces to hold them back. And they are saying, I am one with the Force is with me. Rook dies by grenade after informing the rebel forces what they need to do to intercept the Death Star plans and also setting up this connection. One of the rebels uses a Hammerhead Corvette ship to destroy 2 Star Destroyers, causing the ensuing wreckage to crash onto the shield generator and causing it to fail. Meanwhile, Jyn and Cassian get their hands on the plans but are attacked by Krennic, who shoots and wounds Cassian. Jyn climbs up to the top of the structure and after some obstacles and a fight, is able to transmit the schematics moments before the Death Star arrives above Scarif. It's very visually cool, by the way. Tarkin orders another low-powered blast at the antenna, killing Krennic and causing a tsunami that kills Cassian and Jyn. Yes, this is my best, saddest hug ever. and all the remaining ground forces. Meanwhile, the rebel fleet tries to jump to hyperspace, but they are besieged by Darth Vader's Star Destroyer. Vader arrives on one of the ships and kills many of the rebel soldiers, but they manage to pass along the plans to another starship that escapes. Some archival footage was used in this scene, and apparently they used vintage 70s lenses and asked like the dudes to grow mutton chops and mustaches to match the 70s vibe.
There's no Porkins.
Is there no Porkins? The two of them do show up.
I looked for Porkins.
You looked for Porkins?
The one character I knew outside of R2-D2, Leia, Luke, Darth Vader, Han, which I don't even think I knew Han's name, Chewbacca, is Porkins. And even to this day, I don't even think I remember any of the other generals. I just know Porkins. Anyway, keep going.
Anyway, Porkins aside. Yes, Princess Leia is revealed. And this is after Bail Organa is like, I have someone, I trust her with my life. Who Bail Organa obviously being her dad, her adopted dad. And she assures the person that hands her the plans that they contain hope. And the movie came out less than 2 weeks before Carrie Fisher's death, by the way. So it was really emotional when this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it jumps right into A New Hope. Like, that's seconds away. And just to really twist the knife, Samantha, in the alternate ending, they lived. The characters lived. But
that silence you hear is the rage seething inside me.
This was the original ending, but I think some of the executives were like, "Oh gosh, this is so sad."
There's one or two. Have the damn droid live. My God.
Knowing Star Wars, somehow that droid will show back up.
At least Imwe. Let me have Imwe. My God, I love him. He's one of my favorite actors. He needed to live. I am very upset.
I can feel it.
They could have left.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous. Okay, keep going.
Fun Easter egg. The director stole the Death Star plans prop, which I think is funny. Some reviews I liked that I wanted to include. George Lucas apparently said he liked this movie better than The Force Awakens, and the director of Rogue One said, I can die happy now. David Elrich at IndieWire wrote, a spirited but agonizingly safe attempt to expand cinema's most holy blockbuster franchise and keep the wheels greased between proper installments. Just a glorified excuse to retcon some sense into one of the silliest things about the original. Mostly I'm just really tickled by this because of everything that came after. You didn't know.
Is this like a silly safe? How is this safe? Everybody died.
Well, there's a lot of funny things about this review in retrospect. One of my favorite things, so he's alluding to, they made this movie to explain one of the biggest kind of jokes, plot holes. I wouldn't call it a plot hole, but it's just kind of silly that why would they have this like one place, or if you shoot a blaster, a bolt down it, the whole thing blows up. So this movie was like, aha, we have your answer, and it's so sad. Don't you feel terrible about making fun of it now?
But wait, maybe it's because I didn't know the originals before Rogue One, but I thought that was the whole point of her having those plans. She did have plans, no? Leia didn't get plans that could show the weakness?
She did. They're saying the weakness is silly. Like, as a plot point, that is very silly that they would have that built in. Like, why would that exist?
Oh, so that someone would portray the reason they okay.
Yeah, so they made...
How is that silly? That makes sense.
To me, it always made sense. It was always kind of like maybe a little suspension of disbelief, but also like, yeah, that it's space. I don't know anything about building spaceships. So sure, maybe this thing does lead directly to the core and it's going to blow up. I don't know. But it has been in the Star Wars fandom very much joked about. And this movie was kind of like, aha, well, this is why. And that's so much of what Star Wars fandom is.
That's what they do.
Yeah. And I've talked before, a lot of Star Wars fandom is very toxic. A lot of it is very like, well, actually, a lot of times it kind of, if it's the smaller thing, it tickles me. Like I love the kind of like, Carrie Fisher has this sort of British accent in the first one, or like a strange detached British accent, and they later explained it with, oh, that's a core accent, which really, Carrie Fisher later said, no, it's because I went to school in London, and that's kind of what I thought royalty would sound like. Like, and that
Which is what we are taught.
Exactly.
That's not wrong. They're not wrong.
Right. Like, there was never any part of me that questioned that. But then a lot of fans did, so they wrote in an explanation. Like, they always do this. It's like they're embarrassed that we found a plot hole. But if it's something huge or like character altering, then I don't like it. Then I do not like it.
Maybe it's just George Lucas being a bit of a narcissist who just can't be wrong, so he tries to correct it.
Maybe. In this movie, which I do love, and I don't think, I'm kind of not really talking about this, even though it is part of the culture that made this. George Lucas he gave up control by this point, but he was sort of kind of notorious for that. And that's why the Who Shot First with Greedo and Han scene has changed so much. Because, well, I don't know him, but in my understanding, it's because he kept changing his mind on like how we interpreted that scene and how he thought we should interpret that scene. Ultimately, that he wanted you to, originally, he kind of was more like Han is a straight up smuggler at this point, and now he sort of seems to have come to the point where he wants you to believe Han was shooting in self-defense. Basically what I'm saying is this franchise is notorious.
Are we supposed to think that Han is like all the time, has always been a good guy or something? Is that what we're supposed to believe? Because he is not.
I don't think so, but we're supposed to think he's better.
Valiant?
I think we're just, which again, like I literally, and maybe this says something about me, but I never really thought about it that way. Like I just was like, okay, he has this character arc where he comes to care about people.
But I thought his whole character arc was like caring about people, but doesn't want to show his weakness, and he'd rather be like manly, whatever that means.
But I think that for whatever reason, George Lucas in that one scene has been, because it's changed
really bothered
at
him.
least 4 times. Which, by the way, I'm going to see A New Hope in theaters on Revenge of the 5th, May 5th, and I've heard that it's going to cause a lot of drama because no one knows what version they're showing.
Oh.
Yeah, and I
Will
like,
you
don't
know
care.
Immediately?
Oh, I will know. Oh, if they don't have the green text in the beginning, then I already know.
Oh, you already know.
I actually really honestly don't care. I don't think it's worth getting that upset about. I have my preferred version, but whatever.
Oh, I know.
Yes, I know you know. But that's another great example is that he kept coming in and like adding these things and trying to change it. And I think a lot of that was due to the fan dialogue that happens around these.
So is that a good quality or bad quality, do you think?
I don't think the examples we have, I don't think it's a good quality. I think there are instances where it could have been, especially like something's really problematic, even though they had an example of that in Book of Boba Fett and they just handled it in the very worst way, I thought. But where they didn't acknowledge, they just were like, never mind, forget that happened. It was like that. We just totally changed that now. Right. I remember. So I think there are instances where it could be good. Most of the examples we get in this fandom, I don't think are that. And I do think like, there's just a part of me that's like, let it go. Like it's, so fans are going to nitpick. A lot of these fans are the worst. Let's just be real. We don't need to cater to them. Like it's whatever.
Right.
Just ignore them. It's fine. We liked them. It was a fun like fairy tale romp. We don't need to explain everything that's in there. This makes it sound like I don't like this movie. I love this movie.
To be honest, I don't really take it legitimately since it wasn't filmed in outer space.
I think Samantha's referencing my favorite criticism, I think you are, that I've ever read of Return of the Jedi is clearly it was filmed on Earth. And I'm like, sure was. It sure was. I get what they're saying, but that's also very ignorant because there are deserts on Earth. They filmed that on Earth too. It's just you don't live in a desert. You don't live in an ice place. Anyway, this fellow was very mad about the fact that he thought, I guess, a forest would never exist in space, and this was clearly filmed on Earth. Oh, yay, Star Wars fans. Oof. Speaking of, there was a lot of criticism of the digital recreations of Tarkin and Leia, which again kind of tickles me, given what we're dealing with now, what we're seeing now. This was one of the first instances because Carrie Fisher did die around this time. The actor who played Tarkin had been dead for a while, where there was a lot of questions about the ethics of it because she obviously didn't sign a contract that said, she didn't sign a contract with informed knowledge that that was an option, that was a thing. Like, you do sort of sign away your likeness a lot of times for these things, but this is different than that. This is like recreating you, and that's kind of a messy area.
Yeah, as in fact, there's been apparently a whole concert show in Las Vegas with Whitney Houston.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And they've been selling out. So I don't know. I haven't dug deeper into it. I didn't even know this existed. I knew it's been happening because, we know Tupac had a performance, but it was like a one performance. This is whole shows, apparently. Yeah. And I don't know who's getting the money. That has a lot of questions because our daughter died. So I'm not really sure who gets that, who reaps that.
Yeah, that's a concern that I've had. Kind of the like monetary aspect, who owns you, and I've seen a lot of YouTube videos about it lately.
Well, like that's what we were having again. We're kind of, and I'll come back, but like Jet Li would not do Matrix because he didn't want his moves recorded to be used that way.
Right. Yeah, and I like we're getting into a whole separate conversation, but one of the reasons I really, really love the originals, and I think they work. And there's a lot of nostalgia involved, and I'm not going to deny that. But I do think like Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill, they brought something to it, like personal to it. And
it was an era.
It was. And I just feel like they gave so much of themselves, and they were so genuine in those roles, and they shaped them. And Harrison Ford did a great job, but I think like more so because he kind of has that whole persona vibe anyway, but they kind of like really gave themselves to it, and they didn't do too much outside of it. That was huge. Like, they've done a lot of work that they don't get a lot of notice for, and a lot of it's great, and they should get more recognition. But that's why I think like it's missing something. And that's also uncanny valley stuff we're talking about, but it is a part of this conversation for sure. And I heard, I heard a lot of mixed when this came out. It was really emotional because she had just died, but I heard a lot of mixed reactions to it. I got emotional too, but it was still kind of like, whoa, it's not her. And those conversations are obviously playing out right now with all the stuff in Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett. Also of interest, this movie came out soon after Donald Trump's presidential victory, and screenwriter Weitz tweeted, "Please note that the Empire is a white supremacist human organization." And that's been really interesting of like a lot of really right-leaning Republicans don't seem to realize like the Empire is bad. Like they tweet like the Death Star stuff, and I'm like,
right. Everyone was like, dude, even the songs Republicans use, they're like, that's not what you...
Yeah.
No, I don't think you're listening to this. Like when they start doing Rage Against the Machine, you're like, literally, you're the machine.
It's strange. It's very strange to me. And I have to mention, we've been talking a lot about fandom. I found this whole thing about fan fiction in this movie. And I wanted to include a quote about Star Wars fandom and fans from the New York Times after this movie came out. Quote, "The dominant cultural image of a Star Wars fan may be a lightsaber-wielding fanboy, but women have always been essential creators in this fan universe. They started early fan clubs and mailed out fanzines like Skywalker and Moonbeam, packed with fiction, essays, and art. In 1982, Pat Nussman published an essay in the zine Alderaan that described a female fandom so rich and vast that she was prompted to ask, 'Where are the men?' She continued, 'Male names are rare and columns are fanzine order list. Male faces scarce at media conventions, and the number of men writing or drawing or editing in media fandom so minimal as to be practically non-existent.'" So I think this is interesting because we've talked about this. With the 80s, it's very much simplifying. The 80s, that's when Return of the Jedi came out. That's when this essay was being written. At that point, Star Wars was very equal publicly, but that's when all this gendering of toys and stuff happened. And Star Wars, like, as much as I love it, was very much the sort of thing that launched toys, like movie merchandise that's tied in. Or it's the thing that popularized it and made it huge. And so I think we see this sort of flip of it being seen as a boys thing. And by this point, when Rogue One came out, that's still the image, even though I think a lot of the fandom, especially the kind of the perhaps less seen fandom, is women, for sure. All right, but let's talk about some stuff. Let's talk about Jyn, the main character, who is a character who's not born into politics. She's not born with the Force, but decides to fight for what she sees as right anyway. So this is actually unique when you think about past heroes and heroines in Star Wars. They usually have some kind of relation to somebody, or they have the Force, most likely both. Or are they born into politics? She comes into her own as a leader. As far as costuming, she wasn't sexualized, and this was kind of an upsettingly big deal at the time. I remember reading a bunch of articles about it, like, oh my gosh, she's wearing boots. She's ready for combat. She's wearing situation-appropriate clothes. She's wearing like these shades of browns and gray. Her hair is in a simple style too. I mean, maybe you wouldn't be shocked, but people wrote so much about it. And I remember noticing it when I saw it. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. She's trained. She's competent. She's never really the damsel in distress. She's tough, but she's still kind. She saves this little girl despite the strong I give no attitude she's trying to pull off at first. And she's willing to listen and change and lead. She knows how to fight. She's strong. She's good with weapons. I kind of always hesitate with that stuff because it's like masculine territory, and I don't know that it should be lauded, but it's also, you don't see women doing that often. Like, she can take care of herself, I guess is the best way to put it. She's unique in being the lead, as in it's her alone, although some might argue it's her and Cassian, but like normally it's like Han and Leia or Anakin and Padme. It's sort of her.
Right. Cassian is just there for the hug.
It's a damn good hug. I know you hate it, but it's so good. Still, she's pretty much the only woman of character of note, other than some other cameos. Only 17% of the film's dialogue was spoken by women. Cassian spoke more than Jyn did. She was kind of like...
Of course.
Her face was... I was watching it the other day. I was like, wow, she's always unhappy. And I guess it's always unhappy here. It does pass...
Everyone dies, Anney.
No, it was very sad, I know. It does pass the Bechdel test, but we know that is not the end-all be-all. Another thing we've talked about in a lot of the entertainment that's really popular, a lot of her actions are influenced by men or are precipitated by men. So like her dad kind of draws her in, and then Cassian kind of draws her in, things like that. This was the most diverse Star Wars film when it came out easily. And many expressed annoyance and concern that there were these characters of color, but they were almost seen as a footnote, and they didn't receive as much attention or even merchandise, and lack of women of color in substantial roles. And I think we talked about this in the sequels one, but almost always the lead role for a woman in Star Wars is petite, white, brown-haired woman.
And very pretty,
yeah,
but generically Hollywood. No offense to her. But like, I really, like, she reminds me of someone else that I've never seen, because I've never seen her in another movie. And I'm like, but she reminds me of
right.
A, B, C, and D.
Mm-hmm. The toys thing, Bridget and I did a whole episode on it, and it's really a big deal. Like, I know it sounds sort of silly, but they choose things. They choose characters and genders about what they think toys will sell. And so this whole thing could have been in response to what happened with Rey toys in The Force Awakens, where there were no Rey toys, even though she's the main character. It was this huge fiasco. They still haven't gotten it quite right. I also seem to recall a lot of discussion about Chirrut and Blaze possibly being the first queer couple in Star Wars, but that has never been confirmed as far as I know. And I remember at the time, there was this meme because there was an announcement like, we're finally going to have the first queer couple in Star Wars. And then it was like 2 characters nobody had ever heard of. Please don't yell at me if I'm wrong. But I just remember it being, we thought it was going to be them maybe. And then it was, I think it was 2 characters from one of the animated shows.
And I will say though, I know they talk about they love each other, but even me in my head, I was like, it could be platonic. Caretaker love. And I didn't really grasp all of that. Not that I needed them to make out or anything, but it still was like they played it safe nonetheless. Did I like their bond? Absolutely. But I feel like it could have been any real like brotherhood even. Like that's that level that you just don't know. So even if they were, I feel like they just said it to kind of say it, but they kept it safe so people didn't get mad at them. And them being the creators.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think like we sort of talked about this in the queer baiting episode, and it's a really complicated subject. I think we just need to normalize queer relationships because I also want to see these platonic relationships. Like I want to see that too.
Right.
But also queer relationships.
Right, that's the thing. Is like if it's queer, then that's great. But if it's also like 2 men can actually love each other like this, and it still be platonic, and let's normalize that and make that healthy. A woman and a man can be friends and love each other, but not love each other and be platonic. Let's normalize that. It doesn't all have to be sexual.
100% agree. I love it. That's how I feel too. Another theme throughout this is definitely father-daughter relationships. Daddy issues continue. It's a big theme in Star Wars. It's a big theme. So you have Jen with Galen, obviously, but also Saw, who is sort of her adoptive caretaker for a while, and her really wanting him to be proud of her, which is not a problem. It's just kind of something we see a lot. Also, the death of the mother, which is a recurring theme in a lot of our entertainment, including Star Wars. Yeah, I was like actually counting it the other day, and I'm like, oh yeah, Padme died. Like I was going through, like, oh yeah.
Unnecessary.
It is though. I know you hate it when I bring this up, but I read this essay about like for a kids movie, how do you draw them in? And it's like immediately you have to have the emotional trauma, like the loss, just because the kids don't have the attention span.
So I can't decide if I appreciated the death of the mother in this movie because it seemed unnecessary, irrational, and just out of nowhere. Like, is it a good thing that she was willing to fight against them and not be taken in like her father who got taken in and instead of, fighting with her, just let her die? Or is it her being just unnecessarily wild and not willing to be there for her daughter? Like those two conflicts in me, but also why?
Right. I mean, I think that is a good point. And I think that I've seen a lot of these conversations play out where it's hard because I'm not a parent, so I can't say, but it's a point of a lot of debate, what you're talking about. I've seen it. Also, like, I love this movie. But that doesn't mean that they were clearly like trying to have an emotional thing and put her on her own. And it, maybe doesn't make the most sense. But
also, she'd been that traumatized and been stolen by renegades who also abandoned her. She would have had a lot more issues than what we say. I want to put that
Samantha,
out there.
You always say this, and I have to hold on.
I'm sorry, but it's true. Keep going.
Hold on. I think she had a lot of issues. She even says
but
later,
she seemed to get past them pretty quickly.
She said she's not used to people sticking around when things go bad. Another theme I saw pop up a lot was this theme of believing women, because Jin is the only surviving person who saw the message from Galen saying, like, there is this, I put in this flaw in the Death Star, you need to get the plans. And when they talk about it at this like kind of alliance rebellion meeting, people don't believe her because she's the only one that saw it because she's his daughter. And later when she's sort of like, I'm going anyway, I'll go alone, all these people come up and support her. And Cassian says, I believe you. And then, as I mentioned earlier, toxic masculinity, which we talked about a lot in the sequel one because The Last Jedi is like a whole study on toxic masculinity. But so you have all these dudes, you've got Vader, you've got Tarkin, you've got Krennic, basically being really petty with each other to get more credit.
Right.
Right. And
I felt like I was watching when they do the soap operas with women fighting with each other. It was beautiful.
I totally agree. And for some, because we hold masculine things above feminine things, this is acceptable, but soap opera thing, like you should be, that's a guilty pleasure.
Right. Well, it's acceptable because at least someone dies. You need that action, apparently. Instead of just being betrayed and crying.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I guess, you're right. You're not wrong. Violence, some type of like aggressive behavior. And I don't know. There's just something about me that gets some joy out of that. I know it's not good, but it just made me laugh that they're all kind of like, and there's some really great Tarkin and Vader shade that happens. I love it. Because Tarkin knows he's too high for Vader to kill him. So I really enjoy watching them go at it. They do that a lot in the comics. You can see there's some really good, really good exchanges. And then I found this interesting. A lot of articles I read were talking about how this is a movie about war and politics or avoiding politics. And the timing when it came out was really interesting. Picking and choosing when to be political, losing sight of things in war. So you have Cassian being like, I didn't get to pick and choose when I'm in the rebellion. I've been in this since I was 6. You've also got the everyday heroism. So I thought that was really interesting. I mean, I can't talk about this. It's gonna open a whole thing, but I thought that was really interesting because you kind of get to see like all these different people and where they're coming from and why, and it's not always pretty, I guess. And then hope. It's a really dark movie, but rebellions are built on hope. She's giving me the most unimpressed face. Oh, I do like that she gives that speech. I like that she kind of steps up. I don't know.
And then everybody,
and then she dies. They got a good hug out of it, though. Can you believe? You know what I'm learning through this? Your favorite fan fiction tag would be "Everybody lives, nobody dies," which is a tag.
I just need a few. I don't need everybody. I need a few people to live.
Yeah. Well, yeah. When I was watching it yesterday, I was like, well, Leia lives, but then
she's not on that
dies.
island. She's not on that planet, and yeah, she dies. And she doesn't have a happy marriage. Nothing is happy.
This is why you need headcanon. My headcanon is very well oiled. It's like nothing in the sequels. No. Or maybe some stuff, but only the good stuff.
Did we talk about Hans, the Solo movie? That movie I liked.
Oh,
except for the fact that they do kill off several of my favorite characters, but at least several people live.
Yes. And also Kira, who's the love interest in that one. Well, I shouldn't call her that because she is a badass. She does not need to be his love interest. She fights Vader and wins.
What?
Yes, in a recent comic. Isn't that wild? Wow. But yes.
I'm down for that.
I would love to talk about that. I can also kind of complain about how Jon Favreau has all these voice cameos and things that kind of bothers me.
That's fair. It's not wrong.
Wait, you
but
can't
he now
be
owns a chunk of this, so
these are his babies now. 15 different characters in Star Wars. I'm sorry.
At least he's not injecting himself as a person, like his whole body and his face everywhere.
Not yet. Anyway, I have no real problem with him. I just am like, wait a minute, you can't be this person, this.
But can't he?
I know. I have no power in this, really. I wish I did. Maybe one day. You know what? I'm going to start a scheme. Perfect. We really went off the rails on this one. I feel like we touched on some real good feminist issues, but we also touched on things that were just Star Wars related. Yeah. Anyway, happy Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. Thanks as always for coming on these journeys with me. I know you didn't like it, Samantha, but
whatever.
I feel like it was a good. We had differing points of view. Yes. Well, as always, We would love suggestions for the next movie that we should watch. You can email those to us at stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram at Stuff I Never Told You. Thanks, as always, to our super producer, Christina.
I'm sorry for screaming so much.
No, she's not. And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.